Raise your fists together. I am somebody. I may be poor, but I am somebody.
Red and yellow, brown, black, and white. We're all precious in God's sight. Everybody is somebody. Stop the violence. Save the children. Stop bullying. Save the children.
Hold your head high. Stick your chest out. You can make it. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Gerald Morrow. Welcome to the Rainbow Push Coalition Saturday Morning Forum. Today marks the 70th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education decision, which ended the separate but equal doctrine in our school. This landmark ruling transformed American education and fueled the civil rights movement. As we reflect on its impact and the challenges that remain, let's honor this historic milestone and recommit to the fight of educational equity. Thank you for joining us. Let's begin our discussion in just a few moments. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
The Supreme Court of this nation rendered in simple, eloquent, and unequivocal language a decision which will long be stenciled on the mental sheets of succeeding generations. This May 17th decision came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of human captivity. Unfortunately, this noble and sublime decision has not gone without opposition.
I have today issued an executive order directing the use of troops under federal authority to aid in the execution of federal law at Little Rock, Arkansas.
I've just talked to the Chief Justice and informed him that I shall send to the Senate this afternoon the nomination of Mr. Thurgood Marshall, Solicitor General, to the position of Associate Justice, Supreme Court.
Welcome back, everyone. We have some very esteemed guests that I want to introduce you to. Starting to my far left, we have Dr. Sonia Whitaker. Dr. Whitaker is a National Educational Policy Director for Push Excel. In addition, she's the Deputy Superintendent of Schools in the South Suburbs. Immediately to my left, we have the outstanding Dr. Joyce Kenner. She is the newly retired Principal Extraordinaire, having led top-ranked Whitney Young High School for almost 30 years. With much success, glad to have you. To my far right, we have my dear friend, Hilaria Sims, who is only well-respected in Chicago Public Schools, but she's also a member of Chicago Principals Association. She's been elected board member of the Principals Association. Glad to have you. Right to my immediate right, last but not least, is Shay Ryan-Fetzer. He is also a member of our community, and he is also running for the local school board. Let's get the show started. One of the first things we want to look at is this call back to community. And in this call back to community, as we look at the Brown versus Board of Education decision, let's look at some of the root causes and historical context. Dr. Whitaker, I'll give you the first question. How have historical policies, such as redlining and discriminatory housing practices, contributed to segregation of our neighborhoods and schools?
I can start out by saying that I certainly appreciate that question and have profound level appreciation for looking at this not only from a historical perspective, but from a systems perspective. And what comes to my mind really is systemic racism. And I move closer to the root cause of that problem. And we start to think about things associated with, for example, redlining. We know that across our country, most of our school districts are funded or receive funding based on property tax. So that would be number one, where I would start that conversation. When African Americans, some of America's most vulnerable students and families, are directly impacted by redlining, the direct result of that is that they attend schools that are funded less adequately than students who are in more affluent communities. That proves to be problematic.
Thank you for that comprehensive answer. Dr. Kenner, can you really take a few moments to describe some of the disparities in resources?
I think about the resources that our Black and brown children do not have typically in our schools. Viable art programs, viable music programs, even viable language programs. I look at some of the elementary schools in the Black and brown neighborhoods versus the ones that are in white neighborhoods. They have language programs, they have art programs, they have music programs. In our Black and brown schools, typically, they don't have those kind of resources available to our students. And I just think that is a disparity that needs to be addressed, not just in Chicago, but nationally.
I'm glad you brought up the arts, and I'm glad you brought up music. Ron Fast, what are some of the things that you think that our school board needs as it relates to music?
I think we need a different mentality about what education is. I think for too long, we've been using education. We've been in the business of education. We haven't been in the education of children. And so when she talks about the arts, what I think of is, look, man, I'm in the home of Lorraine Hansberry. We're in the home of Gwendolyn Brooks. We have a school named after Gwendolyn Brooks. But what we do is we decrease what arts are. So we don't say that if you are Gwendolyn Brooks, that is art. If you are a poet, that is art. When does the family, because one of the things we're dealing with in Chicago Public Schools is parent participation in the underserved students. But when do you see all of the families show up to school? When it's a play and when their children get to perform in the school play. Sometimes people will say, well, you know, they think arts is arts and crafts, just cutting things and making paper airplanes. But no, arts is graphic design. Arts is 3D rendering. Arts is STEM. And we can combine all of that into a holistic education for our children. And if you look at schools like Whitney Young, they had those type of strong programs that made children excited about coming to school and being involved in other types and parts of the curriculum. It was an experiential education, not just memorize and repeat.
Well, thank you for that comprehensive answer. Principal Sams, you're known throughout CPS as a guru of data.
Yeah.
So tell me some of the things that are outcomes that are, of our students of color, those disparities.
Yeah, so I think one of the things is that a lot of times we're actually misinterpreting data. So the outcomes of our students are tied very closely to their socioeconomic levels. And yes, you definitely can move students from one place to another place. However, when we talk about the data that people are looking at, a lot of times they're looking at normed data, which means that you're looking at the ranking of the population. And if you're looking at the ranking of the population, basically only 50% of the population is going to be proficient. And this is something we're not talking about when we're interpreting test results. Yes, we also have criteria tests, which a lot of times you'll see in the elementary schools. And if you notice, a lot of times when we're talking about African-American performance, you'll hear a lot of celebrations in elementary school because they're saying, hey, you need to learn these 10 things, and we can teach our kids those 10 things. But once you get into high school or you start talking about norm tests, they're actually competing with everybody in the nation that's taking the tests. So when you're taking someone who has at a lower socioeconomic level, who has lower access to opportunities like music and arts and science, that's going to impact their ability to compete nationally. And so a lot of times what you're going to see is that African American students, as a result, are going to be in that lower 50 percentile, and they're not going to come out proficient. And it's unfortunate because that's being used to create a narrative that African American students do not achieve as high as other students, which is absolutely false. What you're talking about is a lack of exposure. And when we look at learning, I think one of the things that we should talk about when we talk about missing arts or we talk about missing music and drama, how important it is those things are to cognitive processes. So developing creativity, writing regularly helps you improve your reading. When you think about doing math, those are things where you have to be creative about what processes you use and how you use those processes. So yes, you know how to multiply and add, but when given a problem, can you creatively think about, do I use multiplication now? Do I use addition? What type of math should I be doing? And when you take out key important parts of the curriculum to only focus on reading and math, because you create a narrative that these students are so much lower performing, you're really actually taking away their opportunity to get a high quality education.
Thanks for that comprehensive answer. Dr. Kidd, I want to do a follow-up because you did an outstanding job at Whitney Young of making sure you had a balanced culture. And in your balanced culture, you have academics, and you have had an emphasis on the extracurricular activities. Talk about the impact of making sure that they intersected.
Well, as a former college cheerleader, I always felt that there should be a connection between extracurricular activities and academics. And when I became principal, I decided in order for us to elevate Whitney Young beyond where it was, I was going to intersect both of them. So I brought my coaches together and I said, look, we're going to be the best at everything. And I think that all schools and principals should have that same mindset. I remember one time I went to a volleyball game and my volleyball players had mixed match knee pads. I brought the coach and I said, this is not the way we operate at Whitney Young. If we're going to be the best, then everything has to be in order. I believe that students, they chose Whitney Young for the academics, but they also chose them because we were winners at everything. Students have to believe in their hearts that they can win at doing what they are doing, academically and athletically and socially. So the academic decathlon team was number one. The chess team was number one. The soccer team was number one. Girls and boys basketball was number one. And the principal of the school, myself, was basically at every single activity. The kids would say, Dr. Kenna is there to support me. You have to merge all of those together and allow the kids to know that you care about what they are doing, not just academically.
Well, thank you for explaining that intersectionality. As a school leader, I always understood why it was important to have a well-balanced school. The culture of a building is not just reading and writing. The culture of a school building encompasses many different things. Well, let's transition now to the impact, the challenges, and the barriers of Brown versus Board of Education. We want to go back to you, Dr. Whitaker. Was desegregation an illusion?
I think so. The first thing that comes to my mind when you state that is the goal, some would argue, right, historically, from a historical perspective, was to ensure that Black children initially had access to what was perceived to be a high-quality education by being in classrooms with white children. Therein lies the illusion. I don't believe, and research currently supports the fact that that has not proven beneficial in all aspects to Black children in particular. It is my observation that although Black and brown children and children experiencing the impact of poverty, to be quite frank, which include white children, far too often are not reaching their fullest intellectual potential. They are capable of achieving. What I struggle with these days, and I must tell you that I have a unique qualification to engage in this conversation because I have led and taught in school districts serving majority Black students, which I do now. but I've also led and taught in school districts serving majority white students and students serving majority of Latino American students. So I've been in every type of environment as either a leader or teacher that you can think of. And so when I make the statement that they're not reaching far too often, right, because I don't want to make sweeping generalizations, they're not reaching their fullest intellectual potential, in my humble estimation, it has to do with the illusion. It has to do with the notion that by attending schools with white students, that's all we had to do and everything was going to be all right. And we're all familiar with the term de facto segregation. We know there are institutions. I recall I led in a system where majority of the students were white, but somehow, some way, there were at least 3 or 4 schools where, due to redlining, etc., those in a mostly all-white district were the schools where the all-black students went, or all the Latino students went. And so, again, even though the attempt was to desegregate in far too many instances, that actually did not happen.
Oh, thank you for that answer. I want to thank you all right now because we're having some great conversations. We have to go to break right now, and we'll be back momentarily.
Push Excel strives to be a world leader in promoting educational excellence and equity so that every child is guaranteed an opportunity to receive a quality education. We've awarded more than $10 million in scholarships year to date. And you can help young people achieve a higher education by donating to Push Excel right now. Wherever you are, you can support our students as we keep pushing for you.
Thank you for joining us today. This is a wonderful program and we hope that you're enjoying it. I ask that you go to rainbowpush.org and become a member and donate to the best of your ability. You know, this program costs, but could you imagine the cost without it? So we're asking for you to become a partner, to become a member of the Rainbow Push Coalition today and donate to the best of your ability. We're looking forward to providing you with more critical content for a time such as this. Go to rainbowpush.org or just scan the QR code at the bottom of the screen. And we'll see you next time at the Rainbow Push Coalition.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Saturday Morning Forum. Ryan Fest, I know you wanted to articulate some of your thoughts around Dr. Whitaker's answer.
Yeah, I do see what you mean by desegregation could seem like an illusion. You know, as I go through the community, when I talk to people, I know it's going to be a 3-hour conversation when it starts with, you know what the problem is. And, you know, but what I wonder when we look at Maryland versus Board, yes, it didn't solve all the problems, but was that the beginning of the seeking of justice? I think sometimes we think because we got a decision from the Supreme Court, problem is solved. However, what happened after Brown versus Board? Certain individuals went to public colleges or universities, or certain children could go to white schools, but guess what? Black teachers weren't getting hired, so now we got another problem. We got redlining, so we got another problem. We saw skimming off the top of our talent, right? So if you were a black basketball player or an athlete, you got to go to UCLA, you got to go to Berkeley. However, Howard and Morehouse wasn't getting, now they weren't having the same pool of talent that it's like justice is a game of whack-a-mole. And would you say, Dr. Whitaker, that what we say, when we say desegregation didn't work, is it a thing, and I wonder about this as I go through community today, that our people are just tired of chasing justice, when really justice is something every generation has to work for just as hard as Harriet Tubman. I mean, I know we act tired, but Harriet Tubman was tired. I ain't tired. You know what I mean? And so I see so many people in the community tired of, well, this happened, but all my problems weren't solved. Or we got that decision, but all my problems weren't solved. How do we keep the community involved in seeking justice and excited and activated about justice generation after generation?
And I was going to say, I think what you're talking about is the power of allow. So Brown versus the Board of Education, unfortunately, the assumption was that only good instruction and good education was going on at white schools.
Yeah.
We know for a fact that was not true. There were things that were absolutely superior at Black schools. What parents were concerned about was their students' access to things. If my child wants to be a scientist, there are no microscopes at this school. And so part of the original solution, and I think this is one thing about the African-American community, we are a community, even in injustice, that always wants to share. We're never asking for you to give us equity or give us access and take it away from everybody else. So let me just add to this.
Historically, I'm 67 years old. When I was growing up, the town drunk could read, write, and do arithmetic. And so, historically, what has happened between that time period and up to today, where our children are not able to read, write, and do arithmetic on grade level? We have to, as educators, look at what happened. What should we do to counter that concern?
Absolutely. And so, unfortunately, when we went to integration, the idea was that we just need to give up everything that was Black, because clearly it was inferior, and go with what was white. And that, I think, has been a detriment not only to African-American communities, but also white communities as well, because there are a lot of great educators and a lot of great people that their children lost access to also. The one thing that we know historically is that African Americans, even without access to formal education, even without access to the best, we have always been innovative. We have always figured out ways to learn. We have always figured out things to know. That's why we have been the innovators. We have been the inventors of so many things in the United States. So you think, even right now, with our kids not getting the amounts of things that they need, we continue to have great students and come out and do amazing things with limited resources. If we change the framework of how we look at this, it is not how well do Black students do compared to white students, but how well does our system create innovation and progress for everyone, then you have a completely different thing. It is, are you investing in your community, no matter where you're at, so that your community is at the top to be innovative, to be progressive, to solve the problems in your community? But if you continue to believe the lie of racism, you're always going to believe that one is better than the other, and therefore, all you are going to continue to do is try to meet the white standard rather than trying to meet a standard of education that moves everyone forward. And I think you made that clear.
Yeah, I have to add quick value to that. When I think about integration, I think it's important to recognize actually that the U.S. Supreme Court ruling was just the start. You know what we lost? We lost access to our history. We lost access to curriculum that told Black and brown children that they were capable of achieving at high levels. So when I think about, the fact that we're at a point, as has been indicated, where we are not achieving, I have to make give you a 2-second example of that. I was in a school district not too long ago doing a walkthrough where the research would suggest, and I know that you can appreciate this, that Black and brown children need to see images of themselves displayed throughout the building. Do you all know that and I literally walked through with a walkthrough tool that I developed to see in this district or in this school what pictures were on the wall, what artifacts that were made available. Long story short, when I went into classrooms where a greater majority of the students were Latino American, it made me want to be a part of the culture because the images were so beautiful. When I walked into a school in classrooms, this is factual, where a greater majority of students were Black and the teachers were Black, far too often there were limited images of people that looked like them achieving at extremely high levels. And I think that becomes problematic when we begin to think about how important it is that our children believe, we all know the term self-fulfilling prophecy, that they are capable of contributing, that they are capable of achieving. We have to raise consciousness about things like that.
Thank you all for this great dialogue. And what it sounds like is that integration was not real. And what it also sounds like, when African-American students went into another culture, their culture was not prevalent. So that begs for the question, what went wrong? It begs for the question, what did we miss?
Well, I think what you're talking about is systems, and a system always works to preserve itself. And I think we continue to, in education, to be distracted by things that are not about the system. We've been doing school reform for at least 30 or 40 years without much progress. And if we keep saying we're data-driven and we're not making the progress that we're claiming that we're investing to make, at what point does the community say, hey, we've been doing the same thing and pursuing the same things for 40 years without improving outcomes? Actually, the indications are that we've been more harmful to students and more harmful to communities than we have been helpful. And part of that is, especially with our focus on data, is really reframing what are we looking for? What problems are we trying to solve? But the biggest issue that we have to address, which is the system is made to preserve white identity and white supremacy and white ideas about what success is, rather than trying to actually provide an integrated view of what the American education system is like, what is American success like, and recognizing that we are all parts of America. Look at how people talk about education. It's, oh, the white students are superior and they are achieving at certain levels, but then our Black and brown kids are like, have huge gaps and they're dragging everybody down. That's not the right way to think, especially when some of those kids that you're saying are dragging us down are some of the most innovative and biggest contributors in our communities, in our inventions. Like we just had the two young ladies in Louisiana who solved the Pythagorean up there. I mean, come on now. Like if we have African American students doing these kinds of things with limited resources, and you're saying that they're far behind all of the white students, which is not true because you're using averages to make that claim. As was mentioned earlier, there are white students who are low performing as well. Then we're missing our full focus, which is to create education, but we keep trying to preserve the system.
What I wonder, though, is as we have this conversation about Black students and white students, in the environment that we are in now, are we missing the thing about the social economics of it all? I mean, listen, I went to the Old South Shore. And when I went to the Old South Shore, you know, there was the average salary of the person who lived in that community at that time was at the 90s was about $35,000. So we had the second most violent school at that time. We had a high rate of HIV in the school at that time. But now look at the new South Shore. And look at the price of the houses in South Shore. And look at 6 out of every 10 of my tax dollars is going toward the school. And I saw institution flip around. And it could have always been that way if the investment was there. I see Black parents who have money running to push all of their kids into Whitney Young, all of their kids into Kenwood. You know, and I wonder, is this a Black or white problem? Or is this a Black social economic issue? Because we have Black schools that work. We're just not repeating that in underserved communities.
And that is exactly how the system preserves itself. Because if we start talking about socioeconomics, we're not just talking about the school system. We're talking about how does the city government work. We're talking about how does the state government work. We're talking about what is allowed and what is not allowed. How do our court systems work? And I think in the United States, this is a conversation that we do not want to have. Race is a great distraction from the fact that you have a system that is undermining the progress not only of different demographic groups, but of the country overall itself.
Yes, I want to thank you guys for this conversation.
Make me feel empowered. I can do it. You know, should do it with doubt.
Principal Sams has been doing a great job at Bogan High School for years. And as we get ready to go to break, when we come back, we're going to start looking at, well, did we have real choice and we're going to start looking at Chicago Connection. We'll be right back.
Thank you for tuning in to our International Saturday morning broadcast. We need your support. Here are ways to give to Rainbow Push Coalition. Text PUSH, P-U-S-H, to 41444 to support the work of Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. and Rainbow Push Coalition.
We're excited to get more people engaged and involved in Rainbow Push, supporting the programs of Push for Excellence and the Citizenship Education Fund. Now, if you're interested in public policy and you want to help change the policies that impact those who are incarcerated, you can do so. If you're interested in impacting public policies that benefit education and businesses with social economic solutions, you can do that as well. You can become a policymaker by becoming a member of Rainbow Push right now. Now, if you believe in the scholarships that we've given to thousands of students each year, you can help us out. We've awarded more than $10 million in scholarships year to date. Now, you can help young people achieve a higher education by becoming a member of Rainbow Push right now for the annual fee of only $35. And if you're a student or a senior, it's only $15. You can help us make a difference in the lives of millions. Now, if you watch us every week, or if you listen to us on the radio, or if you're viewing on social media, we need you to become a member. And how do you become a member? It's simple. Visit us at rainbowpush.org and press join. Maybe you'd like to support the work of Push. If so, it's really simple. You can do so by texting the word PUSH, that's P-U-S-H, to 41444 on your cell phone, and you can give any amount that you feel comfortable giving, or you can call us at 773-256-2775 or go to rainbowpush.org and push donate. So whenever you want to support, you can do it from anywhere. So keep pushing, because we're going to keep pushing for you and keep hope alive.
We want to welcome everyone back to the Rainbow Push Coalition Saturday Morning Forum, and we have a great discussion that's going on right now. I want to continue around what we were talking about as choice, and we want to make sure that we look at everything from a national level. Although there are some things that are unique to Chicago, but let's continue this conversation around choice. I want to elevate this question around choice. Does the system promote choice, or did the system promote competition among schools for students?
I would say the system promotes the illusion of choice. We naturally always have choices, but the data is pretty much showing that parents in Chicago specifically, I need to look at other cities, they're pretty much either choosing schools that are equivalent to their neighborhood schools or maybe a little lower performing than their neighborhood schools. And so part of that we have to talk about is that perception. So you start off talking about redlining and some of the policies that, cities have had to ensure that African Americans did not progress or kept separate from white Americans as they pursued their own American dream. So when you look at the fact that we have this perception all over the United States that a better neighborhood means better everything. So if the houses in your neighborhood cost more than the houses in this neighborhood, it must be because they are better. Does not matter what the outcome is. Does not matter what is actually happening there. We are working a lot of times off of what is marketed and branded to us. And right now we have marketed and branded to us is that if your child is going to their neighborhood school, then they're not getting a quality education. But if they're going to someone else's neighborhood school or someone else's specialty school, that automatically means that they're getting a better education. And that is absolutely not true.
If I could just add to that, I would honestly say that if the dollars would follow students, and if we look at the dollars nationally and locally and say we're going to give equitable amount of dollars to selected enrollment schools, neighborhood schools, etc., I think we would have a better outcome academically for students. As a former principal of one of the top schools in the country, I can say it was not equitable. When they would come to me and say, Dr. Kenner, we're going to give you new doors, $500,000 worth of new doors. The school was built in 1975. What do I need new doors for? Though that $500,000 could have funded some air conditioning units for elementary schools that did not have it. So I would say that the educational systems nationally, they need to look at where those dollars are going, why they are going to certain schools, etc. The other thing is, yesterday I heard on the radio where a principal was complaining about they were required to utilize a different kind of reading program or something within the schools. Nationally, principals make pretty good money. And I think here in Chicago, if we pay a principal over $100,000 to be a principal, why can't we allow those principals to be creative about what programs come into their school? It's too dictatorial. It's too top down. If you're paying these people this kind of money to do the jobs that they're doing, let them do their jobs. Be creative about what they're doing. Nationally and locally, they don't need to be dictated to making the kind of money that principals make.
Ralph X, someone asked you this quick question here because you brought up South Shore, the former South Shore and the new South Shore. What do you think is the difference why this particular South Shore is perceived as better than the old South Shore? Do you think it was a resource issue? Do you think it was a support issue? Do you think it was a student issue, socioeconomic issue? What do you think was the difference?
Everything you just said. And I want to include an environmental issue. We don't talk about the environment enough. If you look at the new South Shore, it has glass, so light is coming through the building. It has ventilation. I bet it doesn't have the lead pipes from the 100-year-old schools that have never been renovated. So it's just a better environmental thing. They took the school from being, they even changed buildings. They took the school from being in the back of the street and put it to the front of the street, so it has bright visibility.
But it's also one of the 11 selected enrollment schools in the city, which are supposed to be the top schools here in Chicago. And that's a national problem too. New York is dealing with the same thing, and Chicago is dealing with the same thing too. So it's selective.
And I want to talk to what you said about the selective enrollment and the neighborhood schools and follow the dollars. You know, if we have, and I got to say this, if we're giving our public dollars to alternative schools and they start farming children and do things like, okay, convince a lot of parents you have a choice, but it was a false choice, because what happens if your child starts underperforming, your child gets kicked back out to the school that lost dollars because of this alternative school. And then this alternative school says, we graduate 100% of our kids. That's because you're cherry picking and farming, and now the community is rotting because those tax dollars that I paid for traditional schools that we are all talking about right now are going to schools that are presenting a false choice and cherry picking our children and throwing away the ones they don't want. Now you have teachers that have to teach students that they were given, and we lost those parents. We talk a lot about children, but when we lose good parents out of neighborhood schools, the community loses. A lot of people nationally that have neighborhood schools and selective enrollment schools, you'll find that those communities actually work at those schools too. And so we're not supporting the workers, the communities, or the children when we give false choices with tax dollars.
Dr. Whitaker, I want to elevate something to a national level.
Sure.
By you being the National Education Policy Director for PUSH. What do you think are some of the pitfalls of choice?
Well, I think one, our team there does an amazing job of describing that. I think one of the biggest points that come to my mind is limited when we use the term equal access or equitable access. I think that that's number one. When we give the illusion that we have to move students, or we give the interpretation or the impression that students have to be moved from the community schools in order to receive equitable access to a quality education, we cannot be guaranteed that that is always the case.
And so what we've seen is the literacy rates as well as the mathematical achievement rates of African American students, but not just African Americans, all across the board go down, and no one has held anyone accountable who sat in a district office, who spent millions of dollars in all of these district leadership offices and caused this path to get everyone off track. So this is why I'm going to keep saying, you got to pay attention to the system. The system will continue to distract us from changing the way we do things in order to get different outcomes.
All right, great answer. I really appreciate that answer. And before we go to break, I want to get everyone to thinking about this question. Do you think selective enrollment in magnet schools should have an enrollment percentage of neighborhood children? And some of our examples across this country, and especially in Chicago, we have some schools that are selective enrollment schools, but they still have a neighborhood component. Do we think that if those selective enrollment schools would have a neighborhood school component of a percentage, what do you think will happen? Do you think that that is something that could curb some of the inequities? Because we've seen in some schools where they have selective enrollment and a neighborhood school component that they found a way to elevate all students.
And I would say no to that question. At Whitney Young, the students coming into Whitney Young are at the 12th grade level or higher. And when you put a student at the 12th grade level and someone who's reading at the 4th or 5th grade level and try to integrate those students, it's a disaster. So we need to talk about apples and apples and oranges and oranges. I've always believed that students at the very top deserve to have like peers in their classrooms, learning and studying with those like peers. But I also would say that if, again, the dollars flowed with our students, and this is going to be over time, you guys. We can't solve this problem overnight. It's going to be over time. But I would just say that I have a solution. I've always had a solution to our problem here in Chicago and nationally, if I were to speak on a national level. You need 10,000 students apply to Whitney Young, and 300 of them get in. What happens to the other students that don't get in? They are quality students. We need to develop another tier of schools for those students and continue down those tiers until we get to that lower level of those students who are on grade level. Yes, it's going to take some time, but I think it's something that is doable for our system and nationwide.
Thank you for that outstanding answer, Dr. Kenneth. As we get ready to go to break, when we come back, we're going to talk more things about what are the solutions. We'll be right back.
Thank you for tuning in to our International Saturday morning broadcast. We need your support. Here are ways to give to Rainbow Push Coalition. Text PUSH, P-U-S-H, to 41444 to support the work of Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. and Rainbow Push Coalition.
With your national prominence and being at that level, I want to ask you a question. Because a lot of times we realize that yesterday's solution turned to today's problems. What do you think will be some of the solutions today as it relates to Brown versus Board of Education?
I think the biggest solution is one that those that are not in support of students having equitable access to a quality education revolves around the raising of consciousness. We're working and living in a time where there are folks that don't like it when we say woke. So we won't say woke, but we certainly will raise consciousness around these topics. And having had the opportunity to work, as I've indicated before, not only in school districts serving majority Black students, but school districts serving majority white students, I have enough experience to know that there are people of all backgrounds that are genuinely interested in doing a better job of serving all students. With that being said, I also think it's important that we engage in the process of being clear about those things that are happening in America's public schools that serve as counterproductive in supporting us in achieving those goals, such as the banning of books that would suggest that children are intellectually capable of achieving at high level, such as the banning of all professional development or training around diversity, equity, and inclusion-related initiatives. We have teachers from all walks of life. We have teachers from all school districts across our nation that know that they need to engage in the practice of what I refer to as the policy of intentionality. They know that they need to intentionally engage students in curricular-related activities that say that they are capable of achieving at high level, but they're afraid that they're going to lose their teaching licenses if they do so. And in some states, such as in Florida, they will lose their teaching licenses if they do what they know to be true. And then lastly, another example of that would be engage in making sure that we're clear about policies and practices around things like banning students from having the opportunity to access Black history via AP, Advanced Placement Studies. Those things serve as counterproductive. So we have to raise consciousness about why it is important that we do exactly what we're being told that we shouldn't do. And the benefit, watch this, to all Americans, not just Black Americans, not just Latino Americans, in my humble estimation, is the way out of the problem that has been created.
Outstanding. We appreciate that response. It was very detailed, and it's some things that we really can build upon. We appreciate your input. Thanks for adding value.
Thank you.
Right back. We're getting ready to go to break, and when we come back, we'll look at more solutions from our panelists.
We're excited to get more people engaged and involved in Rainbow Push, supporting the programs of Push for Excellence and the Citizenship Education Fund. Now, if you're interested in public policy and you want to help change the policies that impact those who are incarcerated, you can do so. If you're interested in impacting public policies that benefit education and businesses with social economic solutions, you can do that as well. You can become a policymaker by becoming a member of Rainbow Push right now. Now, if you believe in the scholarships that we've given to thousands of students each year, you can help us out. We've awarded more than $10 million in scholarships year to date. Now, you can help young people achieve a higher education by becoming a member of Rainbow Push right now for the annual fee of only $35. And if you're a student or a senior, it's only $15. You can help us make a difference in the lives of millions. Now, if you watch us every week, or if you listen to us on the radio, or if you're viewing on social media, we need you to become a member. And how do you become a member? It's simple. Visit us at rainbowpush.org and press join. Maybe you'd like to support the work of Push. If so, it's really simple. You can do so by texting the word PUSH, that's P-U-S-H, to 41444 on your cell phone, and you can give any amount that you feel comfortable giving, or you can call us at 773-256-2775 or go to rainbowpush.org and push donate. So whenever you want to support, you can do it from anywhere. So keep pushing, because we're going to keep pushing for you and keep hope alive.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Rainbow Push Coalition Saturday Morning Stand. We now have Troy LaRaviere, who's the president of the Chicago Principals Administrators Association. You've done great work over the years. So what do you think so far?
Well, thanks for having me, first of all. And as I sat in the green room listening to this incredible conversation, I was wondering what I could add to it. And the thing that I'd like to touch on is the topic of Brown versus Board and what we've lost. And the way I see it, we haven't lost because of the decision, or our children haven't lost because of the decision itself. Our children, our communities lost because of the way the decision was implemented and who was left in charge of implementation. So let's go to that. And the book you have right there, can I see it? Folks ought to take a look at this book, Jim Crow's Pink Slip. It talks about how the decision was implemented and how we lost as a result of that. And what it shows is that when the decision went down, we were so focused on integrating our children into a system that had resources. We were not focused on ensuring the resources they had in the segregated system followed them into the integrated system. So in the segregated system, they had teachers and principals who loved, adored, and would do anything for them and understood the conditions that they had to deal with, created environments of encouragement, tried to expose them to as much as possible with the few resources they had. When the Brown decision went down, our students were put in those schools, majority white schools, but the staff that loved them did not follow. People who ran the systems fired the Black principals, fired the Black teachers who would create these life-giving cultures for them. In fact, in this book, what she showed was that she looked at the credentials of the Black teachers versus the white teachers who kept their jobs. She looked at the credentials credentials, whether they had a doctorate degree, how much education they had, how much experience they had. And guess what she found? That as a whole, the Black principals and Black teachers were highly overqualified, far more qualified, with more advanced degrees, more experience than the white teachers and principals who kept their jobs in these systems. And so not only did our children lose people who loved them, but the white students in the system that our Black students were sent to also lost because they lost the best educators in the system. They could have had the best educators in the system, but the system fired the best educators who happened to be Black. So they lost the expertise. White students lost, Black students lost. But then they also lost the people who would create these life-giving cultures within the school environment. People like Joyce Kemp. In the beginning, as I sat in the green room, Joyce talked about, as a principal, what she would do, what she did for the students at Whitney Young. Those are the kinds of things that these principals did. So you can just look at the so-called 4 subjects the way most school districts do. You looked at the entire school experience because you understand that students, when they come into the classroom, the way they are able to understand and connect with what's in their classrooms depends on how much exposure they've had to the arts, how much exposure they've had to music, because they're general principles in music, in arts, in debate, in philosophy club that give you access to ways of thinking that when you walk into a math classroom or reading classroom, you're able to connect to the concepts that the teacher is trying to convey in a way that other students who don't have music can't connect. And because you can connect on so many levels, because you have so much exposure, because Dr. Kenneth ensured we had choir. Dr. Kenneth ensured I learned music theory. Dr. Kenneth ensured that we had a debate club. Dr. Kenneth ensured that we had a video gaming club, right? And that video gaming club gave me access to college scholarships for video gamers because of what you did. Principals who did this for Black students, who were more likely to do this for Black students and white students. We lost them because we let the system implement the Brown versus Board of Education decision. Does that make sense?
That makes great sense. And we appreciate that candid, in-depth response of a comprehensive look of how exactly all of the country was affected, not just Black students, but white students. They loved opportunities. They have outstanding teachers in front of them. Thank you for that perspective.
You have to pay attention to the mundane, and Troy kind of touched on this with his answer. We actually have to pay attention to the policies that are written and what is supposed to be happening, and then hold people accountable for what the policy says is supposed to be going on versus what is going on. And the second part of that is we really have to change how we're looking at data, what kind of narratives we're telling with data, because that goes along with the policy. We have to stop taking the narrative of we are trying to, or we are moving forward to. If you are in a school and you are a school principal, there is a point where if you are not successful, we take you out, get a new system, the principal has to do a new system, everything. We need to do the same things in our district offices. We need to do the same things in our state education offices. If these organizations, if these systems have not figured out how to implement Brown versus Board of Education in 70 years, at some point we're going to have to say something different has to happen with the system.
600 schools in Chicago, almost 201 millionaires per school. If we tap just 2 millionaires and give each millionaire 2 schools to give those schools some dollars, I think we can plug in some of that gap monetarily for our schools. And we can do this nationwide. Look at who your constituents are within your school community, within your state, within your city. Tap those people for some resources and ask them for some dollars. And I think in Chicago, we need to do the same thing.
We need to demand that if these conglomerates and franchises want to come and take our tax dollars and get our money, they have to invest in communities. When we're talking about neighborhood schools, the money that comes from our taxes can't only stay in the school, it's got to flow through the neighborhood. And that's the way the school is going to be stronger. So for instance, we talk about environmentalism. How can you protect a tree and not protect a human? Our children are living in toxic donuts. What kind of environment is that for them to come to school and learn when they have to walk past the gas station and get a honey bun and Cheetos for breakfast? They can't focus in school. So we have to make sure the neighborhood is stabilized if we want the school to be stabilized for learning. Listen, I got it. My child, one of the problems she had was not being bullied in the school. We're in the future now. Your child is being bullied on social media. And so our children don't even have social media training. So when we're talking about education, my solution is holistic, communal, modern education is what we need. And that means not just dollars for neighborhood schools, but those dollars actually flowing through the neighborhood.
But I want to take this time to thank everyone. Principal Sams, Ryan Fest, Dr. Kenner, President Rabier, for making sure that we had such an engaging and enriching and solution-oriented conversation. We thank our ancestors and we thank our elders for Brown versus Board of Education. And there's a lot of work to do, but we understand through community, we will get everything done. Thank you for joining us for this important conversation around Brown versus the Board of Education. Please join us next week at the Rainbow Push Coalition Saturday morning forum.
We are sanctuary. We are sanctuary.
When I think of Rainbow Push, I think of two words: social justice,
education advocacy,
political empowerment,
freedom and equality,
corporate partnership.
Stop the violence. Save the children. Don't get it. Shut it down. If we don't get it, shut it down.
political change,
inclusion, evolution, progress, justice.
Jesse Jackson.
Keep hope. Keep hope alive. Keep hope. Keep hope alive. I am somebody. Protect me. Protect me. Never neglect me. Never neglect me.
We want to be bridges to end these cultural gaps.
Going forward. By hope. Not backward. By fear. Hope. Hope. Hope.